Good morning, everyone, on this beautiful October 22nd. We're here today with our TEP folks and our Clean Cities family, looking at what we can do to improve the Clean Cities program in 2021. And wow, hasn't 2020 been an interesting year? So it's exciting times, and we continue to do our good work, and we're excited to talk about how we can even do it better and support you in accomplishing your goals as the Clean Cities. So next slide, please. We'd like to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we would really be hard pressed to keep all of this going. So we appreciate the work that our TEP board and Clean Cities members do to help us support and maintain a good sponsorship. And as always, we need you to participate with us, because that's why we're here, is to support Clean Cities. So make sure that you're part of our sponsorship and that you're part of TEP. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later. Next slide, please. So the goals of today's webinar are pretty simple. We're here to provide you with updates on recent TEP activities and how we're supporting the Clean Cities Coalition. That's what our focus is. And we're here to get your input on improving the DOE Clean Cities program for 2021 and beyond. But specifically, we're focusing on our meeting next week. And then to help us prepare for that meeting, which is on October 28th. We're excited to have been invited by DOE to give them feedback and to help us plan for next year. Next slide, please. And today's webinar leaders are myself. I'm Tammie Bostick, the TEP Vice President, and I'm with Utah Clean Cities. And we have Sam Spofforth, who has been the past president of TEP and really has done so much to move TEP along. Thank you, Sam. And then we have Philip Wiedemeyer, who is the past vice president of TEP, and also he's with Alabama Clean Fuels. And then we have Ken Brown, who is our Transportation Energy Partners TEP Executive Director. Thank you all for being with us today. So Transportation Energy Partners, you'll hear us say TEP, and so that's what we'll refer to it as today, as we are TEP. So we're here to provide policy support to our nation's clean cities and our coalitions and our stakeholders, which number over 15,000, to keep coalitions and stakeholders informed of key policies, programs, and funding opportunities, and to also educate key decision makers about the importance of advancing the markets of clean fuels, advanced fuels, and the clean vehicles that use those fuels. So really important work, and that's what we are here to support you in accomplishing your goals. Next slide, please. So why does TEP matter? I think all of you, at least if you're joining us today, you know why TEP matters, and we're just going to quickly go over the importance of TEP. We are the voice for clean cities in Washington, D.C. We fight, and boy, do we ever. We pound the pavement and we make phone calls and we work really hard to increase the funding for clean cities. And we work very amicably, I believe, with DOE to ensure that our program is supported and it's advanced, and that our coalitions are reaching the capacity that they can manage and that they can aspire to. And we work with other federal agencies. This is another important piece. Those of you who work with corridors, you work with certain grants, EPA grants that, are DOTs. So we work with them very closely to ensure that the funding for clean transportation continues. And we work with industry partners to advance the key federal policies, such as tax incentives and the renewable fuel standards. And most importantly, we need active coalition involvement and support to be effective. We're doing it for the clean cities. You're our boots on the ground. You're the reason why we do it. So this is all to enhance your effectiveness as a coalition. Next slide, please. How can you participate? Boy, we need your participation. So it's essential now more than ever that you're participating. We have the attention of our folks in Washington, we have the attention of DOE, and we certainly want to be a strong network among ourselves. So important, just like you are today, participating in our TEP webinars, participate in our annual Energy Independence Summit in DC, and involve your stakeholders. This is an incredible opportunity for you to bring your key stakeholders, your effective board members, and even some of your local leadership, and bring them to DC or bring them to the table and make sure that they know that that your coalition is working on a federal level to enhance your ability to work on a local level. So essential to have your federal, your state, and your local dollars working in a cohesive manner. And to build a relationship with your elected officials. I can't tell you how important this is. You know, what happens locally in your state is highly directed by your local officials. And of course, they're colleagues of your federal officials. So important to have those networks in place. It's important to educate your local leaders and officials about the importance of clean fuels and clean vehicles. A lot of them are learning along with everybody else, and a lot of this technology is new. So being on the forefront, being the person that they go to find out about alternative fuels and advanced fuels and infrastructure, you want to be that voice in your state. And then to rally your stakeholders and make sure that their voices are heard. You know, the folks that are using these fuels and these vehicles, make sure that they're saying, listen, you know, I'm bringing X amount of dollars into your state. I'm running these projects. I have the largest refuse company. I'm putting in buses. Those things are really important for your elected officials to know that private and public partnerships are indeed working together. And of course, please become a TEP member if you're not. And we appreciate your membership. So next slide. So of course, like everything else, everything's a little bit different this year. Our Energy Independence Summit is still planned, and we're going to be doing it virtually, and we'll be bringing some really essential folks to the table. We'll be talking about some really important things that are going to be changing after November, and we want to be on the forefront of that. It'll take place in late February, early March, so to be announced, and we'll make sure that you know all about that. It will be a virtual event. And we have some really creative ways that we're going to bring people together to have these discussions and to be face-to-face, do, you know, virtual handshakes and make sure that we move things along. And then the Capitol Hill week will be virtual meetings as well, and we'll be in the congressional offices. So we're excited about moving this on, and you know, we're not going to stop just because we can't be there in person. So we plan for this to be a very effective year regardless. So recent TEP accomplishments. This is important for you to realize where we've come from, and certainly the early leadership that brought us to this place. But we all watched our funding sort of trickle away, the unsureness of what would happen the next year. Watching, you know, large amounts of monies come to the table, and the Clean Cities getting, you know, a very small fraction of that. So over the last couple of years, we've increased the Clean Cities funding to 40 million. And that was in 2020, so we were excited to have that infusion. The EV partnership projects were funded 20 million in 2020, and the House increased Clean Cities funding to 43 million for this next year. So yay, an extra $3 million. We want to make sure that that lands on the table of the Clean Cities programs. And we've increased the DERA funding to $87 million, that was in 2019. We've continued to work with industry partners to extend alternative fuel tax incentives. It's important that, you know, our industry leaders, like our natural gas folks and our ethanol folks, that they are at the table saying, hey, this is important for us to have these renewable fuel standards. It really helps advance those fleets and keep them on the road. And we've also worked with we've worked with the House appropriations to secure language to break the log jam on the CMAQ money. This has been a big thorn in many of our sides to try to get, you know, our CMAQ funding up and working, move past some of the Buy America First limitations that have held millions of dollars and projects from deploying. So that's an important work that has continued and will continue to happen. Next slide. Excuse me. TEP working with DOE to improve Clean Cities program. We've all been concerned that the coalitions were not benefiting sufficient from the program increases, so that's been a big focus. We want to make sure that the increased funding actually goes to those programs and support those deployment projects that make a difference, that build our infrastructure and get clean fleets on the road. We've initiated a number of meetings with DOE. We met last October. That was really essential, and we're meeting again. So we're excited to be on a good pathway of good collaboration and shared opinions and thoughts and leadership moving forward for the Clean Cities program. And then we developed specific recommendations in 2019 and 2020 to improve the program. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but essentially those were to make sure that we had tasks that were applicable, that the grant language was appropriate, and that we could actually deploy vehicles and do the work that we are intended to do. And so next week's strategy meeting with DOE will be the third annual collaboration to discuss and to continue to improve our program. So we're excited about that. That's why we're here today. Next slide, please. So TEP's work with DOE has led to significant results. And just real quickly to highlight those, DOE increased our funding in 2019 and 2020. So we're excited about that. Yay, an extra $3 million this year. And in 2019 and 2020, competitive grants resulted in more funding going to projects involving coalitions. We were all so excited about that, to get grants that we could actually apply for that were a little bit smaller, some that were larger, and that we were able to actually bring some additional funding and projects to our coalitions. And that hadn't happened for a while. We watched a lot of grant funding go by that we weren't able to access or even touch because it wasn't appropriate for our coalitions. So big thank you to TEP and all the work that went into making that happen. And we also asked that the language be similar so that we could prepare as we run our coalitions yearly, that we can know what to expect with the next funding cycle. We know that there will be a certain type of funding available, and what do those look like? So we've asked for that to continue so we can be prepared for the next funding cycle. So, you know, we think that's going to happen this year as well. DOE has committed to communicate regularly with TEP and other coalitions on these matters. So it's an ongoing discussion. So there's not going to be any surprises. We try to have clear language and that our expectations are met and that we understand one another and that we're moving forward. So that's another key piece that we really bring to the table and continue, I believe, to carry on some great dialogue. So next slide, please. So the coalitions that will be participating in the October meeting, you can look here, there's 16 of us. And these were all selected by DOE and suggested. So these are the folks that will be participating. So we're really grateful to those folks spending 2 hours with DOE and giving feedback and speaking specifically about what their coalitions need and what they're doing and how they can increase their capacity and to further establish our mission. What are their expectations so we can meet them, and for them to also know what we need to do those projects and to continue to grow and thrive as a Clean Cities organization. So next slide, please. So this is a little bit of what we're proposing to DOE, focus on the principles and priorities of the Clean Cities funding. And again, this is where we really want to make sure that the funding that is allotted for the Clean Cities Vehicle Technology Program is really truly supporting the Clean Cities coalitions. So we're focusing on deploying cleaner fuels and vehicles and infrastructure as directed by Congress. This became a little bit of a murky piece, and we all kind of raised our hand and said, but wait, we want to see the vehicles on the road. We want to see the infrastructure on the road. That's what we're about. So we can educate all day long about the need of it. Give us some money to actually get those projects off the ground. So that's happening. We're excited about that. We have deployment pieces. Our vehicle funding, vehicle technology funding reflected that in the last go around. So we're excited to see that language be and actually be supported, and to utilize our coalitions to make sure that we're involved with those big deployment projects, even if we're not a prime on them, that we're tapped as a sub. That a Clean Cities program is always part of the vehicle technology grants. You know, work with the Clean Cities. That's essential. That helps build relationships for us. It also gives us that umbrella to work under a larger prime as a sub if we choose. So those are really key in achieving our program objectives. And it also helps us invest in enhancing the effectiveness, again, of what we can do. It gives us some additional funding, support, some real projects and real world deployments that are essential to us to continue to be not only a strong coalition, but to be known in our areas and our states that we're able to do those projects and we're able to do them really well. And again, to support a full deployment and diverse range of alternative fuels. We're all excited to see the new fuels that are coming on. All of us have seen hydrogen pop up. We've seen the excitement around electrification and infrastructure. So all those things are essential for us to be on the forefront of that, for us to be the technological advancement and to be the voice of that. So next slide. All right, this goes to Sam. Sam, take it away. Sam's going to talk about the recommendations to DOE and how we can better support the direct funding for the Clean Cities coalitions. Thank you, Sam, for your good work and your input on this piece.
Thanks, Tammie. So I'm going to talk about, we've had a chance to have some conversations within the TEP board, and of course that includes the majority of the board consists of Clean Cities coordinators as well as some industry partners. But we've talked about some ideas that we have, and we'd like to explain those and then get some feedback after we're through the slides. But one idea was simply to increase the funding for the core tasks to up to at least 25, perhaps up to $30,000 from where it is now. We thought that that kind of core funding, base funding was important. Second, to allow coalitions that have sufficient capacity and capabilities to choose to perform up to 6 tasks rather than the current limit of just 4 tasks. Third, to expand the pilot program, the CCCPP pilot, which our organization, Clean Fuels Ohio, is part of that pilot, and several other coalitions are. But it's a pilot. From our perspective, it's gone very, very well, and we feel it would be worth expanding on that pilot. And as part of that expansion, one of the elements there is the ability to select a completely different kind of negotiated task that would be proposed to NREL and then negotiated as a completely separate task. Again, we feel this has gone very well, and we would suggest increasing that from the current limit of $15,000 up to $30,000 for that component. And then finally, I think we all know, certainly the coalitions that have been able to gain the funding in order to receive an intern understand that that is extremely valuable. It's been an extremely impactful part of the program. We'd like to see that expanded, is what we're recommending, and also to provide more flexibility, basically to set compensation levels for interns based upon local labor markets rather than a one-size-fits-all, to secure funding for a full year at a time, if that's the choice of the coalition, to at least provide the option of a full 1 year of funding for an intern, so you don't have to kind of keep going back and going through the paperwork process each time. And then finally, also to expand upon what they began to do this year and to allow funding for up to 2 interns at the same time. I mean, they announced that that was oversubscribed really quickly. I think, again, it's a signal that the funding for the internship program needs to be increased. So with that, let me turn things over to, I believe, Philip, to talk about competitive grants.
Actually, I'm going to jump in here. This is Ken Brown. Can you go back to the last slide, please, Catherine? So hi, everybody. I'm Ken Brown. I'm the TEP Executive Director, and I know most of you, particularly all of you that come to Washington for the Energy Independence Summit, where I'm based in DC. We're going to take a little time now to get feedback on these proposed recommendations to improve and enhance the direct support contracts for the coalition. So, and you can, if you got a question or a comment or other things that you'd like to see improved with respect to the support contract, now's a good time to weigh in. You can type it in the question box, or you can raise your hand, and I think I can unmute you and you can actually get on verbally. So I'm seeing a comment from Paul Wessel in Connecticut that these look good. All right, that's good. We have other feedback or questions. One thing I'd be curious if there are others who are, my understanding in like Sam's organization, Clean Fuels Ohio, there are 9 others in the pilot program. If there are any others of you who are in the pilot program, can you comment on, has your experience been favorable like Sam's has? We got a question about the pilot, Sam, which is, and I don't know if we know the answer, but it's how are coalitions selected for the pilot? And this is from Joy Gardner with Empire Clean Cities.
Yeah, Joy, that's a good question. I do not know the answer to that, unfortunately. I know that the DOE had a process in working with NREL to choose those coalitions. I think that might be a good question that could be posed to the NREL team or to headquarters.
Yeah, in our meeting on next week, I think when we talk about our proposal to expand the pilot, I think we could, do people have, and maybe people could apply. I don't know. And then there might be some criteria or something like that. I don't know if people have thoughts on how people should be selected. That would be good. Sam, can you say a little bit more about, the things you like about the pilot, like the fact that you work with NREL as opposed to NETL and other aspects?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, I mean, it's a different sort of a relationship. NETL, they do a great job on contract administration. I think we all know that. Anybody who's worked with NETL, whether it's on this contract or whether it's on a competitive grant contracting process. The approach that NREL has taken, at least with us, and I think with the other pilot recipients, has been a little bit more programmatically oriented. So a little bit more oriented towards, kind of what's the point of the different tasks? What are the outcomes that we're looking towards? How can we, kind of look at these tasks in terms of how they're driving us towards meaningful programmatic outcomes? And I think that orientation from NREL it's a fairly natural orientation because they house the Alternative Fuels Data Center. And so I think that's been very positive. And then this additional negotiated task, I just can't say enough. I mean, it's we're a very diverse group. Every coalition is different. Every market is different. And the needs are different in different places. And so the ability to propose tasks that are highly relevant, and in some cases, tasks that actually give back and support the entire Clean Cities network is kind of what we've opted for. Just very powerful impacts can come from that.
That's great, Sam. Here's another kind of a question. It's actually more of a comment proposal. This is from Sam Bingham in Chicago, which is and it relates to what you just talked about, Sam, which is, Sam saying DOE should take the guardrails off of one or two of the tasks so there's room for innovation, which sounds like in the pilot program that you have that ability to negotiate a separate task. And we could certainly bring that up and, maybe we could add it to everybody's base contract, or maybe there's one just open-ended task that the coalitions define. I don't know, but I think it's certainly with your experience with NREL seems like a good direction to go. Tammie, go ahead.
Out that is part of what we're discussing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's been an ongoing discussion, and Sam came up with that we could do, additional negotiated tasks, because all of us find ourselves in that position often where we have, a request or a task that comes up or a project that comes up that may have come from maybe a listening session, and all of a sudden you have a fleet saying, yeah, we want to expand, help us do that. And that takes a lot of time, and it takes money and resources. So being able to tap into a pot of money and saying, hey, we have this task, it's going to cost us $25,000, work on it for 6 months, we're going to do a need assessment, to be able to tap into that money, and it's really not a lot of money, but it can make a lot of difference to a project moving forward in a timely manner. So Sam has given that a lot of thought, and so has this TEP group, and we want feedback from y'all as well. That would be handy for, I think, a lot of us to be able to tap into additional funding and maybe expand or customize, just like was said earlier, can we customize our tasks a bit? And I think I think we should have the right to do that, at least on one task, and have access to more money.
Great. So Joy Gardner just collecting, and I'm hoping, Catherine, that we have an ability. Do we have an ability to have a record of all these comments? I'm hoping, because we need that. I'm sure we have that ability, and we're
Yes, we
recording
can make
this.
that happen.
Okay, awesome. Because Joy Gardner is saying, like, an application or process for the pilot would be good, as long as it's not too unwieldy, but to give kind of everybody a chance to say Then we have a question from Craig Peters in Connecticut, and he's asking whether these recommendations include the new NREL pilot program. And I think what Craig is referring to, and Craig, you should correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a process going on in 3 states, Connecticut, Indiana, and Colorado, where DOE is working with the coalitions in those states to consolidate and better coordinate and collaborate their efforts. And so, I mean, I think some of our recommendations, I think, would follow and would be relevant to those coalitions and the work that they're doing as well. So I don't see why not, because you're still going to have negotiated tasks and get funding from DOE. But that's kind of a separate process. Sam, you want to?
Only just to say that, yeah, I don't think that anything would preclude that. It certainly should include it, and not, be very inclusive of that. I will say that I don't know that there's been a lot of information shared more broadly. I'm certainly not privy to information about that process that you're referring to, but I think it's an important one that we all need to learn more about and kind of see, how that, maybe that's something else that can be talked about with the DOE.
That's good. And then here's a good recommendation from Bob Moffett in North Dakota, which is to include language in this year's, the coming agreements, I guess it's next year, even though this year's already started, but that, clarify the ability to do, outreach and communications virtually, particularly given the COVID crisis, just to, re-emphasize that. I'm sure DOE will be fine with that, but that's probably a good thing to just include in our recommendations and flag that. So thank you, Robert. And that's all the comments and questions we have so far on the support stuff. I do believe. There's another one. There's Carrie Garvin agrees with Sam. Somebody, I don't know who this is, but somebody has a comment that the IHS and Polk data from NREL is not timely enough to maintain our standing as a go-to source for this information for local policymakers and stakeholders. Our base funding could include some funding for us to purchase it ourselves. So we can bring that up for sure. Let's see, what else? I think that might have been from Sam Bingham also. All right, I think we should move on to competitive grants. That's great. Very good, great comments. We will, and just so people understand the process, we have the past 2 years, this will be our 3rd year doing this, prepare a set of specific recommendations, including this stuff that you're seeing here, as well as a number of things that folks are proposing, and give that to DOE, and we'll share the written recommendations with all the coalitions, so you know, and then that will be a big part of our discussion with DOE at this meeting next Wednesday. And that process has been, very, we haven't gotten everything we've asked for sure, but we have gotten a lot and seen a lot of improvements and a much better understanding, amongst DOE of some of our concerns and things that would help the coalitions, as well as, a better understanding by us of some things that sometimes constrain DOE from doing things, and sometimes things that we might want might not always be the best way to do it. So anyway, it's been a very positive process. So can we go to the next slide? And Philip is going to talk about the competitive grants, which we've seen increased over the past several years, and we've also seen the coalitions get much greater access to those funds, to the grant money. Go ahead, Philip.
Okay, thank you. So the principle here for not only competitive grants, but all the recommendations to DOE is to strengthen the coalitions. And by strengthening the coalitions, you make the overall Clean Cities program at DOE more effective. And that helps us when we're up on Capitol Hill talking to the decision makers and elected officials about funding for the Clean Cities program. If you're not getting results, it's hard to, you're not going to be able to convince elected officials that more resources need to be provided to for this program. So it all ties together, and a very big part of it has been the of the $40 million that was appropriated this year has been for competitive grants. And in past years, we haven't had as much opportunity as coalitions to participate in those grants, or they were structured to, in a manner that didn't allow for participation. And we voiced those concerns to DOE. And I believe we all believe that they heard those concerns, and they were much more responsive this year in the FOA that was issued. So again, our focus is to keep a strong focus on deployment of vehicles, fuels, and infrastructure. And that's what Congress has directed the department to do in the appropriation language that was passed. It's important to, in those categories where Clean Cities coalitions can participate, that there continue to be a requirement that coalitions either be a prime or a prominent partner in a project with clear roles and commensurate funding. So that's a strong principle that we emphasize. It's also very important for grant programs to be consistent from year to year. And that has not been the case in the past with DOE, as it has with other agencies like EPA, like the DERA program. We all know what the DERA program is going to be year to year. We may not know what the funding level is until Congress acts, but the requirements are consistent, and that allows for more advanced and longer term planning to be able to submit an application for a project. So we have voiced that concern to DOE, and this year there was more consistency. So we think that's very important in order to get good applications for projects. And I think the DOE has been responsive to that. So the program should have similar goals and similar requirements and similar topics, and the timing from year to year. Now, timing is not always in their control because it depends on when Congress acts on their budget. So that's a factor that's not within the DOE's control. But these other things certainly are about the goals and requirements and topics of the FOIAs. You know, TEP is a fuel neutral organization, and so we want the grant opportunities to support a broad range of fuels and technologies and not be overly concentrated in one particular fuel or technology. We agree that and want awards to be geographically diverse and to meet, more importantly, local market needs and opportunities. In the past, DOE has sometimes frowned upon duplicating a type of project because they funded that last year. Well, they may have funded that last year in the Southwest, but the market conditions in the Southeast, that would be beneficial. So we want to see things spread out and reflective of what the needs are in local market opportunities. And then the last thing is that grant funding levels should impact as many communities and support as many coalitions as possible. So where there are opportunities for coalitions to collaborate together on a grant application, we don't want that to be precluded. So next slide, please. So this is a chart that shows in this year's FOIA the number of grants that DOE said that they were going to do for these topics, areas of interest that clean cities have the opportunity to participate in, what the actual number of grants were, the grant sizes that the FOIA set, the parameters, and then what the actual grants were and what the total spending was, both what they proposed in the FOIA and when they made the awards, what the actual grants were. So as you can see from this chart that they pretty much did what they said they were going to do. And with the actual number of grants, we may have liked to have seen a little more, 18 when they said that they would award between 14 and 36. So it's there, but it's on the lower end. But the funding, and I think that was a reflection of probably of the cost of each project, but the overall funding level was very much in line with what they actually said they were going to do. So so that's a good thing, and we should and intend to compliment them on that. Next slide, please. Next slide, okay. So our proposed specific recommendations, and we want your feedback after we go through these 3 or 4 bullet points on that, is what we're proposing to recommend, that they should provide a greater percentage of Clean Cities funding for grants. So in FY20, the total was only 17.6 million of the 40 that went to directly, that coalitions were involved in. There were some projects awarded in those categories that in which coalitions were not involved. So that doesn't meet the principle of this money supporting and involving coalitions. There were a lot of applications in both the proof of concept and open topic categories, and a lot of those projects that were submitted did not get awards because of the funding level limitations that DOE set. So we think they ought to be higher funding possibilities for those 2 categories. Another thing that's very difficult for education, outreach types of activities is the cost share requirement. And typically DOE has that we've had a 50% cost share requirement. And that's very difficult to do on outreach, education, and technical assistance or training, all of which are critical to the program's mission. And so we're going to recommend that that cost share requirement be no more than 20% for those types of activities. And then the last point has to do with replication. Any of you that have ever participated in a DOE grant, they always require us to demonstrate how our project that's being proposed can be replicated. But there's not really a great mechanism, or DOE doesn't provide enough information about successful grant projects and their results to encourage replication. How a project that was done out west could be done in the Northeast, or a project done in the Midwest could be done in the Southeast. And so we think there ought to be more information and dialogue and a more formal process for replicating successful deployment projects. So with that, I think Ken will open it up for some feedback on what our recommendations are, and anxious to hear from everyone.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify one thing on the first bullet here. Basically, Congress provided $40 million for the Clean Cities program, and only $17.6 million of that $40 million was provided for competitive grants in the last year, and we think that's a little low on the percentage side. That means all the rest of the money, I mean, and it's probably like for sure under 10 million, it's probably more like 6 or 7 million is going to direct support to coalitions. It was probably a little more last year than it was in previous years because of the pilot programs and some other things. And then the rest of that money is all going to the labs and other support for the program that's kind of undefined, to be honest. And so we'd like to see more of the funding of the 40 million go into the competitive grants. So that just to clarify that. And then I just wanted to also, there were basically only outside of the electric vehicle community partnership projects. Can you go back one slide to the table, Catherine? Thanks. So these are the 4 areas that were funded that, you know, mentioned that Clean Cities coalitions either had to be a partner or there were a lot of extra points if coalitions were partners. The EV partnership money was separate from the $40 million that went to the Clean Cities program. That was an additional $20 million just for those projects. And they did involve the coalitions, which was good. But so out of the $40 million, there were only 3 areas, and the 2 where the Clean Cities programs were, you know, were the most largest participants were the proof of concepts and the open topic ones. And so we'd like to see more of the dollars go into those projects. So that's the basis of that. Back to the next slide where we were. And anybody comments, questions, recommendations, input on, you know, what on these items related to the competitive grants? Not seeing any yet. Anybody have comments? Questions? Everybody likes these recommendations for the competitive grants? Anybody disagree with anything?
Are there any other specific topic areas that should be added that you'd like to see to propose a topic? Of course, the open topic area gives a lot of flexibility there to propose something. And
okay, I'm seeing a few more. All right, Sam, you are very prolific. Sam Bingham, thank you. Let's see if I can read these in my box. The 30% Clean Cities participation requirement for the open topic category was great. It would be great to include a percent requirement for some of the other categories as well, even if it's a lower percentage. Okay, particularly in the proof of concept projects. I think those are meant to be deployment projects or related projects with a local or regional flavor. So that's a good suggestion. All right. And Sam wanted to emphasize that our proposal to increase funding for competitive grants should not be to the detriment of the direct coalition support funds. And so I think we have asked this question. I think we need to ask it again, board members, which is, you got $40 million. Just, you don't have to tell us where each penny is going, but tell us in the broad categories, where is the $40 million going? How much is going in direct support contracts to coalitions? How much is going to competitive grants? How much is going to other technical support for the coalitions? And I guess I think we should ask that question once again. Because that will help us ensure, you know, that if we're arguing for more money for competitive grants, it doesn't come out of the coalition support funds, because we don't want to do that. Sam says, strongly agree with the cost share reduction proposal. And here's another comment, which is, thank you for organizing, but we've had very limited time to provide feedback on what you're proposing. So we're not going to finalize this till early next week. So please feel free to call any one of us, to email other suggestions in. And part of the reason is this meeting, we only had about 2 weeks notice for this meeting. We had more time in previous years, but because of COVID and because the election's happening, this got pulled together, and we thought it was important to have this meeting. We had a little less time to prepare, so we apologize for that.
Yeah, but please, everyone, if you want to think about it more, offer more specific, please email Ken or call and discuss with Ken or anyone on the TEP board. And I think by Friday, if we could have that feedback by Friday, that would enable us to incorporate it into our recommendations to DOE next week.
I would really like to hear from folks if they would be willing to Send us what you believe a base contract amount should be for a coalition. And do you believe that it should be tiered for a small coalition that works part-time, full-time, whatever? Tell us your specific needs and why you would, want an increase in your base amount to operate, task 1 and 2 only, plus additional tasks if you're able. So we can make sure that there's some, equality going across, and then we want to work on equity to make sure that everyone's getting what they need to work at their full capacity and to grow their coalitions along with these projects. So please feel free to reach out to Ken with those thoughts. And again, like Philip is saying, we'd like to pull that together tomorrow so we can be prepared for next week. So thanks for everyone's input. It's important that we hear from you.
So we should move to the next one, but somebody else just added, I'd like to see the grant topics allow for projects that include more novel forms of transportation like e-bikes, and those were not allowed in the open topic area this year. So maybe we can allow the open topic area to be a little more broad because it is open topic. So that's a good suggestion.
Right,
also.
I would think so that would feed into the. I would think that e-bike piece would feed into the EAMS, and the smart mobility. We talk about the first and last mile, especially in big urban areas. Maybe it does make sense for us to expand it and say e-bikes are part of that, something like that. Or for delivery, I know that Suzanne was talking about in San Francisco. So, and UPS is doing some bike delivery. But anyway, those are great creative.
Okay, on to the next area. So the other thing that TEP is focused on in the last few years is that obviously we believe that the heart of the Clean Cities program is the coalitions, and the key to having an effective program is the strength and effectiveness and sustainability of the coalitions. And obviously, coalitions come in different shapes and sizes. They represent, different territories. Some places are statewide, some are more in metropolitan areas, and we think that diversity is good. But across the board, we think there's a lot more room for DOE to invest dollars and brain power and focus on mechanisms to strengthen the coalitions and help them be more effective. And from my perspective, at least, I think DOE's very strong at supporting the coalitions on technical matters and things related to fuel and technology and infrastructure and fleet assessments and all kinds of different tools. And they're less strong at kind of organizational development kinds of tasks. And also our experience is that over the years, DOE has made a lot of efforts to provide support to strengthen the coalitions, things like the peer mentoring program, things like the intern program, but those things have not necessarily been institutionalized and consistent from year to year. And so what we're recommending that DOE form a task force of coalition and agency leaders that would really focus on this specific issue of how do we strengthen and enhance the effectiveness of coalitions over the long term. And among other things, and we're looking for other things that you all think this task force should focus on, but one is to institutionalize and strengthen the mentoring program and the intern program. We've heard great things about both of those programs, but to make them consistent from year to year and to help train the mentors so the mentors are even more effective at mentoring the newer coalitions, to have the program be more what's everybody's favorite word this year? Transparent is the word of the day. But to have how the program works more transparent, how you can how people can participate in the mentoring program either as a mentor or a mentee, those kinds of things. Also, providing staff development initiatives such as executive director training programs, utilizing outside experts who are strong in providing training and technical assistance in how to develop and strengthen nonprofit organizations, and possibly even, I know in the Obama administration, HUD partnered with charitable foundations to leverage resources that went in, additional resources that helped fund nonprofit groups that were participating in various HUD programs. And I think the Clean Cities program would be a great potential opportunity for that kind of partnership between DOE, the coalitions, and foundations as well. And so we don't know what the election's going to bring, but it could bring lots of new opportunities. So that would be another possible thing. So thoughts, comments on strengthening the coalitions? What do you need? What would be most beneficial? Do you like the mentoring program? Could it be better? Do you like the intern program? Could it be better? Anything else? Catherine, I am having the hardest time reading these questions.
If you click the box with the arrow pointing out, you'll be able to expand it.
I mean, I've expanded it, but it's just, maybe I need to click this arrow.
I don't see any new questions.
You don't see any new ones?
Mm-mm.
I'm deleting them, so maybe I can read them that way. Kevin Herdler made a comment that they would like to see only Clean Cities coalitions as primes for certain grants. We've had a lot of, it's not on this topic, we've had a lot of discussion with DOE on that, and I was a big advocate of that, but I think so few coalitions have the capacity to be primes that I don't want to preclude opportunities. Even ones that thought they wanted to be a prime, once they looked into it, really didn't want to be a prime. I mean, Phillips, Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition is a good example of a coalition that has looked at this and loves being a sub, but doesn't necessarily want to be a prime. So anyway, but I think we could do more to increase the percentage requirements of funding to make sure that as subs, Clean Cities have a prominent role. Anybody have thoughts on this area about strengthening the coalitions? Catherine, are you following the questions?
It looks like Samantha Bingham said, can we please get these slides ASAP so we can provide more feedback tomorrow?
Yes.
And I believe you did answer the rest of the questions that were on here.
Okay. All right, so we've come to near the end of an hour. So, and we've had a lot of participants, and let's just go to the next slide real quickly. This is just about our recommendations on communications. We're not going to take comments on this now, but just to be clear, one is we haven't really done this, even though we've recommended it in the past, and I think DOE is willing to do it, but that we ought to have quarterly or at least a meeting 6 months from now to review how we're doing on this process with DOE and tracking the recommendations. That's number one. Two is to schedule this annual fall Clean Cities meeting as well as the peer exchange meeting further in advance so that coalitions can participate actively and be prepared. To actively involve the coalition coordinators in the planning of both of these meetings. I'm talking about the peer exchange and this annual collaboration meeting. I know there's some opportunities for involvement in the peer exchange, but I've heard suggestions that people would like to see more shaping of that meeting so it more meets the needs of coalitions. And then finally, to have DOE do more to help publicize and participate in our annual Energy Independence Summit. So with that ends our recommendations. And next slide has my contact information. So that's my email and phone number if you have questions, comments, more suggestions, and we will send these slides out right away this afternoon to all the coordinators. And thanks so much, everybody, for participating. Tammie, you have any closing remarks?
I do. I want to send out a big thank you to Catherine Yoder, who pulled us all together and chased us around and made this happen and did a great job with this webinar today. So thank you, Catherine. We appreciate your support and help.
Thank you so much, guys.
And thanks everybody for participating.
Give us your feedback.
Please give us more feedback. Keep your cards and letters coming. And we will carry forward with DOE next week, and we'll report on the results. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Bye.